So, all right, I'm going to just do a quick introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at the AWS Pug meetup. We're in, March already? Staying on the trend of AI, it's been a hot topic. It's what a lot of folks like to hear about and a lot of folks like to talk about. So before we jump into this, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, HashiCorp, AWS, O'Reilly. O'Reilly Publishing. There's a few books in the back as you guys leave tonight. If you want to grab any, feel free. Anything on that back table is up for grabs. And that is it for the intro. I will turn it over to Dylan, who's going to bring us through his presentation. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So Dylan Kenny, I'm from VividCloud. We're a US-based software consultancy. I work with Jeff and also Adam. But we are headquartered in Brunswick, Maine, and we've got an office in Exeter, and then another one in Massachusetts somewhere that I've never been to. But yeah, AI, obviously hot topic right now, has been for a while, so we'll be diving into Agentic AI, what VividCloud has come up with for a solution, how that's deployed on AWS, what that looks like. But before we get to that, we'll just do a little overview of AI in general, generative AI more specifically. And then dive into the solution that we have, and we've got some demos, architecture diagrams, basic ones, and we'll go from there. I am on, just for Kevin remotely, I'm on my hotspot on the internet, so if something happens with Zoom or if the quality is bad, just send a message or say something. And then the other piece here is feel free to ask questions, interrupt me. I don't just need to talk to you guys. Want it to be interactive. So if you have any questions or comments or anything to throw in along the way, please do so. So yeah, again, outline, let's talk about generative AI a little bit. What VividCloud has developed for our solution. We have that deployed internally as well as externally in a few customers, different environments. We can discuss that a bit. We'll go through a demo of our solution that is running internally, and then some architecture diagrams and what we have done for testing and observability, tracing, etc. So again, taking a step back, and we've got a group here and talking with people beforehand. A handful of you are well-versed in AI, or at least pretty familiar with it, and myself, I'm no expert in AI, particularly the inner workings of LLMs, kind of a black box to me, but I know enough to be dangerous and know enough how to interface with it and build systems on top of LLMs here. So different generative AI types, you can produce text, images, videos, audio, and obviously code. I imagine most people here are software or software related, at least, maybe hardware guys, but some familiarity, I would presume, with ChatGPT, Claude, Cursor, whatever different AI tools that exist and that are out there nowadays. So looking at this, right, we've got artificial intelligence as the big outer circle. Subset of that is machine learning, and then within that we've got generative AI, and then within that, even more specifically, LLMs, your large language models, and then your diffusion models, right? So we'll be focusing, and what we at VividCloud have focused on is the LLM portion of that, and building on top of that, and building solutions for ourselves internally, but also for customers to make the most out of their data that they have. And a big piece of this also is the deployment aspect. A lot of our customers may be government contractors, but where is some of the data usage of these companies and what they're doing with your data? Maybe it can't leave certain areas. It's got to stay within their GovCloud account or other private clouds, or in their own data center, right? So a large focus there, and yeah, we'll dive into that in a little bit more specifically. Here we are. So looking at large language models, just generally how they work. Again, we're all probably familiar with this, won't spend too much time here, but you've got an input, whether that's prompt, text, video, I don't know what else they have nowadays, a bunch of text. You get that, you feed it into the LLM. The LLM, using, let me get feedback here, using data that, oh, did somebody join?
Yeah, I tried joining from my phone, sorry.
That's all right, just a little feedback.
Trying to disable audio and it wasn't working.
Yep. So yeah, just generate responses based on the text input using the vector store that is created through the training process, right? So a lot of this has advanced, whenever ChatGPT came out a few years ago, was kind of the aha moment where everybody got excited about it, or most everybody got excited about it. I was one of the naysayers who held out for a while. I don't know if anybody else also is like that, but my typical response is, yeah, we'll wait and see, and this hype bubble will go away. But it hasn't, and after Adam and other people within VividCloud and other people that I know, kind of showed some examples of them using different tools, how they have used it in work and in personal projects to improve their workflow, make them more productive. It was, kind of, okay, I'll give it a second chance. And that was probably 18 months ago. And even in those last 18 months, the leaps and bounds and improvements that have been made are pretty impressive, right? So anyways, yeah, I at first when it came out thought, this is kind of like the blockchain bubble. I don't know if we got any crypto people here, but that was the hot, everything has to be crypto, everything's gonna be on blockchain. It's gonna change the way we do shipping, change this, and I thought this was similar, but I was wrong. It's certainly here to stay. To what degree, that could be argued, I guess, but here we are. So when looking for anything that you're doing, but specifically building on top of an LLM, whether it's a RAG application, an Agentic AI application, or just trying to host something locally for your own purposes, for customer purposes, you've got a lot of different options when you're looking at things, right? So these are 5 different areas that you would want to use to evaluate different LLMs and to make sure that you are choosing the right model. So there's different benchmarks out there. We'll go through. The next slide is an example of Anthropic's Claude model and where it scores on these. That's the 3.5. But there's some different benchmarks. Again, I'm no expert on kind of some of these surrounding things. So maybe some people know more about those than I. But you've got benchmarks, context windows. So that's a big one. Depending how much data you're trying to feed into the applications, how much you can process. So your input text and your output text, combination of all of those tokens is your context window there. So that's the maximum amount that you're able to feed in. The more you can feed in, the larger context windows that you're able to have, the better responses that you'll get, the better reasoning that you'll get out of the LLMs. Also architecture and size, this is the number of parameters. Has a big impact on performance as well here. And then kind of coinciding with those top 3, context window, number of parameters, and then how it does on the benchmarks, you're gonna have variable costs. So your top end models, again, I'm sure we're all familiar with ChatGPT and the pricing there and paying for it, and then you've got XAI, Claude, so you've got the consumer grade ones, and those are typically monthly fees, but as you move towards like an API-based usage, you're paying token-based fees, whether that's through Bedrock or through OpenAI or Anthropic, etc. And then lastly, touched on this a little bit, but the privacy rules, what are they doing with your data? Are they using it to further train their models? Are they not doing anything with it? There's different considerations there, and depending on what you are looking for, what your clients are looking for, that certainly will have a big impact, and probably the biggest impact with your selection, right? So again, looking at a specific example here, so this is Anthropic's Claude model. Looking at the scores here, this MMLU, certain tests, massive multitask language understanding test, again, a certain benchmark test. I believe they use like multiple choice question and answer here, which there are some concerns that people have about the validity of scores on this, because those answers are kind of out in the public and you can use it to game the system if somebody wanted to, right? Or they could make a really small model that would evaluate really high on the benchmark. So there are some things to be careful about with those benchmark tests. But generally speaking, people are operating in good faith, and you can take those at face value. The context window here at 200,000 tokens, I'm not sure if there's any that are larger than that. Now, again, everything's changing so quickly. You can wait a few weeks or a few days and there's a new model popping up that beats previous benchmarks and has larger context windows and more parameters and performs better on X, Y, or Z, right? So all of that is very much in flux and changes very frequently. And then cost here, so you can see, and this ties into something we'll show at the end, but with your traceability and kind of metrics and looking at things and trying to understand the whole user flow through your LLM-based application, and there's different tools for that. But this cost feature, you've got different weights for input versus output tokens. And then with Claude, there's different ways you can consume it. One is through Anthropic's API. A second way is through AWS Bedrock. I'm sure there are other ways as well, but those are the two ways that I've used it, that we've used it at VividCloud there.
I have a question there.
Yeah.
On the cost, since the output is generally fed back into the input throughout the session, how in the world do they calculate the cost? Because I see different pricing between input and output tokens. First time I see that.
Yeah, so your input tokens, so as you typically are building out like any LLM-based application, it's stateless. So you're passing in your chat history to it, right? So when you're using ChatGPT, your previous chat history up to whatever your max context window is or whatever is getting added to it, right? So yeah, whatever is put as an output, that's probably why it's cheaper on the input side, but typically you're feeding that back in on the input side. So really, for that one, it's really 18 cents, but 1.8 cents. Yeah, 1.8 cents really for your output tokens, if you wanted to view it that way, right? Because almost always you're feeding that back in.
Right.
But not necessarily. If you have a super long chat or something, where you're bumping up against the context window, like you may have to start getting into some strategies for how do we maintain the chat history without feeding every single message back in. Because if you have a long enough chat history, you're gonna hit the context window. Or if you have a large enough data set that you're pulling from, that's a part of that, right? So you start getting into kind of gray areas there with how to handle that. But yeah, it is interesting on the pricing side, and especially trying to scope that out. Again, we're a consultancy, so we're working with other companies, but their main concern is, okay, what's the cost for you guys to build this? But number two, what is our operating cost on this? And that's a challenge, I'll just say Adam's the technical lead on really all of our AI projects at VividCloud. He's a point person there, so he's put a ton of work into all of this. But especially a pricing sheet, trying to figure out all these different variables, right? You've got your different models, you've got your different, okay, what are we expecting to use? Or are we looking at data sets? Are we looking at SQL queries? Are we doing API calls? There's a whole host of factors that play into that, so it's very difficult trying to get a correct ball, and how many users are using it per day, per week? How many messages are they sending, right? So there's a lot of variables there. It gets pretty complex pretty quickly. But that's where the tools, the traceability tools, metrics come into play, and you can kind of revise that as you go along.
And I would say for ballpark, it's about maybe 90% is input tokens. So that's the price you guys see mostly.
Okay.
Excuse me, Dylan?
Yeah.
I hear a little bit of buzz about SLM, small language models. Is that like a marketing thing? Because
yeah, so I'm not super familiar with that. What I am, and anybody else speak up, or Adam, but what we have heard and what we've talked to AWS about is using larger models to train smaller models for cost purposes. So if you can, you can use the capabilities of your larger models, and I'm fuzzy on the details of how you would do that training, or even like how you do fine tuning, something I want to spend more time on and figure out how, okay, if we want to fine tune a model to be better in this area, like what are the steps to that? And I know there's packages that you can use, and okay, you do all these iterations and basically trial and error, see if you get better results. But that's what I'm aware of with like how you can make how do you reduce your cost, right? Well, okay, you can get fancier with how you're doing your different inputs and how you're doing your retrieval and all of that, but that's not going to do it a lot. But if you can change the model that you're using to be significantly cheaper, and still get the same results or close enough to the same results, that's a game changer. And so there's a lot of talk about that. I haven't seen a lot of specific concrete or examples of like, yes, we did this and it worked great, or it even worked okay. I haven't seen a lot of that, but I hear a lot of that type of talk.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy, he's very passionate about it, and I didn't know if there was such a thing as like, Claude Jr. or something. I didn't know what he's talking about.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah, they each have like 2 or 3 different versions of it, like Sonnet. They're at 3.7. It's the larger one.
Okay.
But you have Claude.
So that's what he meant by SLM, maybe?
Yeah, an SLM is typically a distillation, so they use model distillation to compress the knowledge and capabilities of a larger trained model into a smaller one, and then it costs a lot less to run a small model, and it responds much quicker.
Yeah, and you'll see that we have different components in the app, and we could use a smaller language model for some of them. This is the one we use for the core, the one that actually gets all the data that we have back from the search. That's why we need the large context window, but you'll see there is something in the app that's a router component. We still use Claude, but we can definitely switch it to SLM because it doesn't require that much context, and we could do that for savings.
Yeah, so when we get to the diagram of that, we'll point that out, or remind me to point that out if I forget. But yeah, that's an interesting point here, right? So your solution, you're making different LLM calls at different points in time, and as Adam just said, for doing your routing, okay, you've got 3 tools, 5 tools, 10 tools that are pretty distinct. Like, you don't need the most powerful LLM to determine that, right? You'll get good results from a lower powered LLM. And the lower powered one or smaller ones, right, they're gonna have smaller context windows, less parameters, but they may be good enough for certain tasks, depending on the use case.
So I know this is probably a tall order, but can you approximate at all the 200,000 tokens? What does that translate into? Like, I'm sitting at my machine and I'm typing in stuff. So, in any terms, like, words in my queries or time that I'm sitting there doing it, or
what is it, like 1.2 words per token roughly? We'll see. We have in the app, we have how many tokens each query consumes, so we'll see it, but I think it's like 1.2 or 1.8.
Each word is 1.3 tokens, because when you tokenize a sentence, it uses subwords basically.
Okay.
For better vocabulary usage. So I guess that's the ratio, ballpark ratio.
and is there any distinction there for, like, A of the versus, like, significant words?
Oh yeah. So that's an average, 1.3.
Okay.
All right, and then here, just comparing, interactive versus autonomous LLM applications, and we're going to get into agents next. But one thing that kind of stumped me for a while is this blurb down here on the left. What does taking autonomous action mean in AI? And it just means that the AI system can and will make decisions and execute those decisions or the tasks that come from those decisions on its own, right? So, like, take an example, like a customer support agent. So if it's non-autonomous, the chat bot or whatever your application is on top of the LLM might suggest a refund policy, but the user then has to take another step to actually process or do that. So it says, okay, if you want to get a refund, here's what you have to do. Go to this site, click here, fill out this form, and you're good. Whereas an autonomous AI agent would explain that to you, maybe would ask for a verification. Do you want me to do this, yes or no? Maybe not. Anyways, and then it would actually process the refund for you. So it has the ability to do that based on a few different pieces. And again, like another example, if you're doing like a DevOps application or agent, it might, okay, the server's down, how do I restart it? It gives you the code or the command to do their server restart, but it won't do it for you. Whereas an autonomous AI agent would, again, it wants to prompt you however you set it up, but let's say it knows the code, it knows how to SSH into that machine, it does all of that, it does the restart on its own, and it reports back out the output or the outcome, right? So that's a distinction there. Again, I mean, a lot of this is, there's a lot of words thrown around. There's a lot of hype around different areas or different things or buzzwords that are hot for a little bit, and they move on to the next thing. That was one for me that kind of just, once I heard the explanation in these terms, it made sense and clicked. And so we're on to agentic systems. So this is an example of the autonomous agents here and working in a reason and an act format, which is React agent, not to be confused with React on the front end. But you have LLMs. The LLM has access to different tools that it can use to perform different tasks. And then you've got your external environment that those tools are interacting with. So you can see here, again, like take the DevOps example, right? So you have a task, okay, we're not getting requests on the server, can you see what's wrong? It goes, it SSH, so it has a tool to maybe SSH into a server or a fleet of servers. So it does that, it pokes around, it knows commands, it knows how to use them, knows how to parse the output. So, and that tool will interact with an LLM as well. So we have another architecture diagram of our application afterwards that we'll get to, and that might help solidify this a little bit. But the LLM knows the tools that it has. You query the LLM, okay, what tool is appropriate for this input? It grabs the tool. The tool may use LLM, may not, but it goes ahead and executes those actions based on whatever it thinks the proper course of action is. So that's the reason and act portion, or a React agent. And then it observes the output, and then it'll take a next step. The next step might just be, okay, we did what we were supposed to do, report that back to the user. The next step might be, oh, that didn't work, or I did the wrong command, or that, something of that nature, and it will iterate and correct itself, or try to correct itself. All right, any questions? We're on to the VividCloud portion here, or what our solution is. But before I move to that, any other questions or comments here?
So you've got an AI agent taking autonomous actions with its tools.
Yep.
One of the things that it seems like could happen is it could go through a series of attempts that don't work.
Yep.
And end up kind of looping. How do you short circuit that?
Yeah, so you a few different ways, and Adam, you can expand on this after, but like you could just do a simple counter, like go through this 3 times if you don't have the correct answer, if you don't have an output or a result that is defined as correct or a success result, then report back and stop. That's the simplest way. I don't know, Adam, any other?
No, that's pretty much it. There is a parameter that we just set, but we haven't seen it hit it at all. So
and like
it's pretty good about knowing when to stop on its own.
Okay. And like where you could get it right, and this is, I haven't built a React agent for like building out front end. I don't know who was talking to you about front end stuff before, but like, right, I've gotten into loops with, talking to ChatGPT about like some CSS layout or, different stuff. And I sit there and prompt it a million different ways and then say, oh, you're not giving me the right answer, go start a new chat, try to reformulate it, right? So like, I'm getting in that loop manually. I'd be curious, to see how well a React agent, if you actually coded one up, would do versus me doing it manually. And the other piece here is like, so we've got a SQL agent as part of our solution. Like sometimes you do see in there, like it formulates a query and then it evaluates the query and says, this query is actually not a correct query, I gotta redo that. So it catches it before it even tries to evaluate it sometimes. Sometimes it'll evaluate, it'll get an error back and it'll change it. So yeah, you most certainly could get stuck in a loop. And so yeah, you have to protect against that. Yep.
But Adam, the limits that you referred to, we've built those into the framework. So it's not a question of in your prompt you're saying,
right. It's
only do this 3 times.
Yeah.
It's an exception if it hits the limit.
Yeah. And so your tools are just, like submodules or different pieces of code within your application. So yeah, they're coded in there. You could parameterize it, right? You could do different things there and get more advanced than just try it X number of times. And if you don't get a result, right, you could have like a step. But there's a lot of different things and a lot of different techniques that people use to try to get more correct answers or get better results or better performance. And you get crazy and you can start chewing up tokens exponentially. I guess a lot of it, right? A lot of it involves that feedback loop there.
Are React agents same or replacement of the large large action models?
I'm not familiar with large action models.
At some point, there was talk about large language model becoming large action models, and it was essentially a list of actions that they could carry out.
Is this the mixture of experts type models?
The mixture of experts is a little bit different. The large action model was really it taking actions on its own. So, like booking a flight, making a reservation, things like that, where it would take actions and complete those on your behalf. Similar to a delegation to an assistant or an agent in this case. So it sounds all very similar.
Yeah,
It does.
it sounds like the same exact thing. Maybe a repackaging of
Well,
or rephrasing,
yeah,
but yeah, it
because they tend
sounds.
to change the naming
Yeah.
of these models and concept.
Yeah, but conceptually it sounds the same. What you're describing sounds the same as what React agents are. Yeah.
The nice thing about React Agent is that you don't have to predefine a workflow. The workflow is very dynamic. It's really LLM and a set of tools, and it kind of figures out the workflow on its own.
Does it have to be trained on the tools to
No.
know how to use them?
Just a description, it could be a sentence or two of what the tool is,
Yep.
and that's it. Like this isn't, a tool to crawl API, REST APIs, get JSON responses. Very, very basic, and you can do larger. I don't know what do we have, like a paragraph for each of our tools?
Yeah, pretty much.
So you just give the LLM a short description of what the tool is, how to use it, and it figures it out pretty well on its own. And right, that's where a lot of this stuff, especially as you're building out bespoke applications or dealing with different types of data or different agents that are doing different things, like a lot of it's iterative and testing and like, okay, what prompt, gives us the best results here? If I tweak this way, how does that impact the outcome? So yeah, a lot of it is trial and error. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty remarkable how well it does, honestly. All right, almost to the demo here. So just talking about our internal application. So we started building this out, I don't know, almost a year ago, 9 months ago in the summer sometime, I think, last year, maybe summer, fall.
I thought 6 months, but yeah.
Yeah, and this is in between, client projects, different responsibilities, different things that we have going on. But yeah, we wanted to get our feet wet, so to speak, with AI and LLMs, and the idea that we came up with was to take our internal documents, HR documents, medical plans, all that sort of stuff that we have, and perform or build an application out on top of that provides a chat interface to those for the employees of VividCloud. That's where we started, and then we expanded that to this agentic model with our React agents. So we have 3 different data sources, and these are each in its own agent, but we've got our document storage, so that's our like healthcare documents, company policies, etc., those types of documents. We've got an SQL database that right now there's, for our company, we don't have anything in there, so we used a mock data set from a site that has a lot of mock data, a lot of cool stuff. What's it, Kaggle, I think. I don't know if anybody's, we get some head shaking. So yeah, we got some mock data out of there, which we'll see in the demo. And then the third one is an API agent, which we have set up to connect to our GitHub account internally. So again, just kind of building out different functionality sets, different features there. But those are the 3 different data types that we are interacting with that we have agents for. And you could expand that, to whatever, if a company had some other type of data store, or, especially ChatGPT, right, like searching the web. They didn't have that, I don't know, 3 months ago, but like that's a different agent for doing a web search. So if it doesn't make sense to, okay, it doesn't seem like it's a fit for the document storage or the SQL database or this API, like let's search the web and see what those results are. So you can really layer those tools on and do a lot of different things and get really advanced there as you go through things.
Differently. So, like for example, if it found an answer in the API and it found something on Google, you're going to prefer your internal data versus external?
Yeah, I think you would do that I mean, my first thought would be, so these are very, like in our use case, right, these are very distinct sources, like there's no overlap, but yeah, in a real world case where there is more overlap, I mean, you could combine the answers. I'm pretty sure you just prompt the AI beforehand, like, prefer this tool or prefer our internal data if there was anything that match, or you could say, you know, if there's a match for internal data and a web search, maybe return both and explain, you know, like, so you can just, it's a matter of prompting for what you want.
Okay.
Is what I would think off the top of my head. Does that sound right?
Prompting in architecture, like Dylan said, these are mutually exclusive in our case. So really there is not a query that could really get data from each one of these and build an answer in our case. But you could definitely change your architecture and have an aggregator at the end, do what you said. So it all depends on the use case.
So you have a decision model that picks what.
Exactly, that's the router
best
that
data
I was
set.
mentioning.
Okay.
So you're basically training it yourself, but using your enterprise customer's own data?
Yeah.
And that,
we're not training, sorry.
okay.
And we're not using our customers' data. So our internal data is just like our healthcare documents, our company policies, vacation policy, you know, the handbook, that type of stuff. The SQL data, we pulled data from the site.
Next slide shows up exactly what you're saying. There you go.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah, so yeah, mock data for a sales, like I don't even know what's in there. Sales data, is it all just sales data?
It's like CRM mock data.
Okay.
We couldn't expose the real one.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give a good, like, you know, a large enough data set that made sense with enough tables. So that's what that is. That's mock data from Kaggle, a site that they've got a bunch of data sets that you can pull for free, and they've got other cloud-based computing you can do for AI stuff for training as well, I think. And then just our GitLab, internal GitLab instance.
But for the customer installation, we have, for the document storage, we're hooked up to like an S3 bucket.
With
They
legal
can
contracts
dump
right now.
documents into that. And aren't they using the SQL as well?
SQL for sales, kind of like very similar to this one.
Yeah, and their use case is much closer, and we're in the middle of the project with the data store for them. So the first project we did with them was with a SQL agent. Now we have the document agent is being built out right now. So those there, and right, like, it makes sense, they're a real business. That data is a lot closer together, so it'll be interesting to see one, how they want to use them together, if they want to use them together, but also, yeah, how do these queries, or how can you pull from both to get better answers if you combine them than just dealing with them totally separately.
And for the SQL, we're just pointing at their database.
Yeah, the SQL and the API are kind of easier to use, definitely.
Yeah, the document store, so with the document store, and I'll get the demo up here.
So is the router governed by the LLM? Depending on your query, it knows, oh, this is in the HR files versus this is in the CRMDB.
Exactly, and we use two libraries mainly to write it, LangChain and LangGraph, if you heard of them, and they have a really nice feature called structured output. So you can really define, I want my output to be from an LLM, just an enum, right? You don't want the old text that comes with it.
Paragraph,
So
yeah.
it becomes a very powerful classification agent without training.
And yeah, just I guess before the demo, since we're talking about this right now, just to give a, you know, kind of a high level architecture block diagram here, what we have going on. So, you know, your typical, we've got a React application that's stored in S3, but we've got, you know, AWS Cognito user pool set up that's tied into Active Directory, but, you know, plug in any auth you want there. We've got a token verification system or limit system, so that can be, you know, especially if you're deploying this internally or externally, you could get a huge bill if somebody's doing something or using it excessively, or if you deploy an update and, you know, aren't paying attention and get some feedback loop there, you can run up costs very quickly. So having something in place, whether that's on the API side with a billing limit, here with a token limit, but you can do that at a user level or at a whole organization level, right? AWS Comprehend, I think we've turned or disabled that for the time being, just because we don't have time to tune it or play around with it, but that's for removing personal information and blocking, you know, any offensive content or messaging that somebody may be doing. And then here's the router piece. So this piece here, and think of the router again, it's making an LLM call it's taking the input question. It already knows which tools it has available. That's how it's set up. And then it's making an LLM call to determine, okay, where does this make the most sense to feed it? And in our system, again, for our internal system, these information stores are very disparate. There's not really any overlap, so there's no ambiguity there. But in a real world system, you might have it, and it might use multiple agents to formulate the response. So yeah, that right here, your router is making an LLM call to determine which tool am I going to be using to try to get a result here, and that is it at a high level. And you can do a bunch of looping in here. You can feed back the response back. You can do all your standard stuff, depending on how advanced you want to get there or what your needs are. So, any more questions on this portion?
Yeah. So, can you elaborate on the use of Bedrock in this context?
Yeah, so Bedrock, you could plug in Bedrock instead of using Bedrock, use OpenAPI's API or Anthropic's direct API. We're using Bedrock internally for the primary reason, honestly. One, the data stays, I don't know what OpenAPI's data policy is anyways, but with Bedrock, your data is not being used to retrain. Yeah, OpenAI, sorry. But the second reason, and I would say primary reason for us, or one major driver, a client project that we are doing is they're a government contractor. They've got a GovCloud account. All their data is within GovCloud account, so that can absolutely not go out anywhere else. So your options are, for them, they're on AWS. So using Bedrock or self-hosting some model, which that's super expensive, prohibitively expensive, honestly. So that's a major reason, but yeah, you could plug in anything you want there, or you could use a self-hosted LLM.
So in this context, you're using a fixed model from Bedrock, hosted in Bedrock.
Yeah, and we're using Claude.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned that.
So Claude, just to be clear, Bedrock and AWS, they collaborated with a lot of these LLM providers.
Mm-hmm.
They are hosting the models.
Yep.
It's not like they are routing it to their APIs.
Right.
And it's another abstraction layer if you wanted to change out your model, right? Like you don't have to change any of your application code. You're changing, if you're keeping everything else the same, right? If you have a major context window and it's built around that, you try to go to a super small model afterwards, like your application's going to have issues, but you don't have to change any of the interfaces. None of that has to change. Yeah. All right, we'll go to the demo here. So we got two different applications here. This is our internal AI applications with our 3 React agents. So we'll run through those, and I've got some questions that are already set up that I'll copy and paste into here. And then this is the length use is what we're doing for traceability and debugging, and we'll go through that afterwards a little bit. There's a few other options for that. Langsmith, I believe, is one from from LangChain. Similar, but this is, again, this can be self-hosted. The data stays within wherever you need it, which again, for a specific project that we're doing, was a requirement. So that was a driver there. We were using Langsmith before for a bit. All right, let me get, sorry, all right, so I got a set of questions here that we'll run through. If I can move this over. And so this is, again, this is our internal application. So this is a React front end that we built out. The back end's Python Fast API using LangGraph and LangChain frameworks. And then connecting, it's all hosted on AWS using Bedrock, Claude. Is the model that we're using within Bedrock, and connected to the SQL database that's in our AWS account, and then connected to our GitLab instance, which is not in AWS, it's GitLab hosted, not that matters. But anyways, we'll start with the SQL agent. And again, this is, nothing super groundbreaking here that you guys are going to see. This is, you're all, I'm sure, familiar with the chatbot style interface. So, basically your own chat GPT connected to whatever you need it connected to. And what we do have a few options here. Sorry, this is hard. You can change, right now we've got verbose output on, so you're just seeing the thinking process as it's going through things. So you can see the different queries that it's doing. So it says, okay, it formulates a query first, then it evaluates that query. Does it look correct? Right now it says it looks good. Okay, I'm just seeing if it was going to do a reevaluation or if it got itself into a place where it got a query that was not good. So anyways, question was, how many unique products are in the database? And the answer is there are 7 unique products in the database. And so this SQL agent, it's not given the schema of the database. It's not given anything. It's given, here's your database, here's your schema that you're using, here's your connection string, basically. Go figure out how to interact with it, or go figure out what's in there, right? So there's nothing really more involved in that. It's pretty simple, it's pretty hands-off. You can do some tuning around it if you wanted to, but out of the box it works very well. Other things to note here.
How does it figure out that product is the table it needs to query?
Just by its ability, so that's the LLM's ability to understand natural language and parse and figure out, okay, here's my schema, here's all the tables that I have. So it does that step. Are we doing that once? Or are we doing it on every call where we're evaluating the schema, looking at all the tables? Yeah.
This one has 4 tools. One of them is a schema.
Okay.
It gets the schema.
So is that part of the system from?
No. So the tool to get the schema, think of it as really just calls to a database to pull the schema out.
Mm-hmm.
And once it has the schema,
So there should be one more tool in here.
it relies on naming, right? So product, but if let's say the product table was called X, right? It would not have found it. Maybe it would have found it.
Because it might have looked at the columns in that table and determined, okay, this looks like the shape of what a product is. It's got a quantity, it's got a price, weight, so like it may have found that out, but yeah, it is much easier for it. That'd be an interesting thing to actually try, is screw with like column names and see how well it does. But yeah.
Something we recommend our clients is to create views that are dedicated for this agent. That helps. It's denormalized, so it can do joins, as you'll see, but it's much easier for it if you make it a denormalized view.
And so just this, so that query right there, that was, what are we at, 10,000 tokens for that? Is that right? That's
yeah.
So Jeff, is that you that asked? So yeah, just to give you an idea there, right? So the question, not a lot of tokens here, but everything that's doing in the background. So you've got your schema agent that's parsing the database as a whole, all the tables, columns, figuring out the shape of that. Then each one of these sequences along the way, right? Like these are all consuming tokens, and then obviously the output back here. So anyways, to give you an idea of scope, what you're looking at, yeah, to get that is 10,800 tokens. And I think up here, yeah, so like right now we have no limit on the token usage, but right, like that's what I've consumed here today, or I don't know when that repeats. Is that monthly, Adam?
Yeah, some users are admins, some are not. So Dylan is an admin, so he has unlimited tokens.
All right, and we won't run through all of these queries, but you can see, it's again your chat interface. It's using this connected to whatever data you have it configured to. So which of these products is the most expensive per unit price? So again, same type of situation where it's going through explaining its thought process, its reasoning, going through each step of the way, outputting that. And you could change this, right? So like end customer or client, they may not want this. You get some business person, they just want the result, and they'll sit here for 30 seconds and they don't need to see the progress. You give it some little indicator that's still thinking. We have a toggle for that to shut off, verbose or not. But anyways, it's good for our purposes here.
So I assume turning off verbose mode, that's not going to change your tokens used. That's just going to change what you see, right? Because it's still doing all of this in the background.
Correct. Okay. Yep.
That was my question too.
Yeah. Yep. That'd be a good hack if it did reduce the usage, right? Okay, so which of these products is most expensive per unit price? And it came back with this GTK 500, 26,000, and then it gives a second and a third. And okay, so this is them all sorted by price. So again, it knows the schema of the database, it knows what it looks like, but that's it. There's no more programming with these tools that we have to do special or like tuning or training of them. It goes out and it does all of this on its own. And some interesting piece here that we've ran into or are running into on different client projects, if you have, if you're truly solving a problem for them with their data, meaning like they have a bunch of things they want to gather out of that data, insights, they have questions they want answered, they have, and they can't get them today, or it takes them 5 days of somebody digging through tens of documents or hundreds of documents, right? If they have, okay, I would like to know the answer to this, you say, okay, great, we can build out the tool, we'll plug it in, and you get an answer, but you have no idea, is that answer correct or not? So that's like a big piece of this, if and when you get to like doing the validation phase with the client is, okay, right, like we don't know if this is, right now, I don't know if this is accurate or not, right? We could go look in the database and figure out for ourselves if this is accurate. But depending on what you're asking and the results that you're getting, it can be a lot to verify those results and get those results and use them as a baseline for testing going forward and comparing any changes you make to the agent or to the system as a whole. How are we doing against our baseline result that we know is ground truth, right? So it's something interesting when you're dealing with all of this. All right, so that's the SQL agent. We can run through more, but I'll move on to, we'll just go to the RAG agent next, we'll do the API agent last. So the RAG agent, this again was the first piece with our internal documents. So these are stored, I think right now, we put them in an S3 bucket. And with your documents, so let me back up. So SQL agent, right, there's no pre-processing or offline step. Same with your API agent. You don't have to do anything special. You hook it up, you're good to go. With your documents or data store, typically you'll have a pre-processing step required to vectorize those different files so that you can do searching against them and then plug those results into your LLM. We do have a diagram, which I'll show after this, but if you're uploading a file like to ChatGPT, it's doing that pre-processing step on the fly, live. If you have a large set of documents, hundreds of documents, thousands of documents, obviously pre-processing them on the fly every time you have a query isn't a good solution there. So you do the pre-processing once, you can run that, whatever, every time a file changes in your bucket or in wherever you're storing things, and redo that pre-processing, and then you can get your interactivity on top of that. So what kind of benefits does VividCloud have? So again, it's giving its reasoning, what it's doing, and will update us along the way. And so this, again, using Lang-Smith or Lang-Fuse to determine ground truth. So as we are iterating on this and building this out and changing the pre-processing steps along the way and the different parameters for that, the answers you get here may vary wildly. And we could ask it again, you probably get, the wording will be different, slightly different, but you're using the LLM there to evaluate correctness at the end. But anyways, yeah, with the question, what kind of benefits does VividCloud have? It searched all those documents that we processed offline and then stored them in a vector data store, and it returned these results here.
Is there any sort of caching or mechanism if you have two employees that ask the same question within a relative period of time? Is there any way to reduce the compute load required to answer that?
I'm sure there is a way to do it. We are not doing it. I don't know of any techniques. I haven't looked into it in any depth, but I'm sure there's a way to do it.
A semantic cache, which would store these answers. We looked into it a little bit, but never implemented it. Basically, you take the query and you compare it, semantically, maybe like with a cosine similarity to the cache, and see if there is an answer in there. Definitely something you can do.
Cool.
And again, that one was 12,000 tokens to get that output. We'll see one more question here on the documents, and then we'll do an API question or two and move on. So number one, what was number one? Medical insurance. So it's just going to give us some more details there about those specific things. So again, like nothing groundbreaking here, right? We're familiar with this. You could upload, if we've got 5 documents about, that cover our medical policies, you could upload them into ChatGPT and get similar results.
That's pretty good. You guys hiring?
Yeah.
I like the co-pay.
And they're not hiring anymore, they've got agents.
We pretend we got people, right? But you can see this result, right? Like this result was there's more here slightly than the previous one, but we're feeding back in previous result to get this one. So you can see here that was 33,000 tokens. So there's different techniques for how you deal with chat history, and you can manage that depending on your needs, how much context you want available, how much you want to spend. Like all of that can be managed in different ways, right? Like you could summarize each of the responses. So instead of all of this text, maybe it's 2 sentences, and feed that as a chat history back into the so there's a lot of things you can do there. And again, a lot of it's trial and error. There's a lot of different techniques and ideas that people are coming up with pretty frequently of like best ways to do things, especially around the history piece. We explored a little bit different options there. I don't know what we settled on. What did we settle on for chat history? What are we doing right now for it? Because
right now we found that you can't have the chat history grow indefinitely because it keeps going into the context. So we found that we keep the first 2 messages. We found that there's a lot of good information there, kind of deciding the rest of the conversation, and we also keep the last end messages. So we kind of like shrink everything in between, and that seems to work.
Just like you do for a story, you keep the beginning and the end, and you forget about the middle.
Another technique, you could summarize it. We tried that, but we have a set of automated testing where we can see the quality at the end, and we found that would work the best.
all right, and we'll try out the API agent here.
And so I noticed that you start a new chat for every agent. Is that context related? It's not like if you were to ask the API question in this chat, is it able to switch agents dynamically?
Yeah, but yeah, it's easier, or you get edge cases where something might happen where you're like totally switching context, right? But like, okay, so what are the projects under the VividCloud subgroup? So, and again, in our situation where these things are so far apart that like it's not going to be confused. But if you've got a chat history that's related to A, and then you ask some question that really you want to use tool B, but like it's kind of related to, like you just might get, just like ChatGPT, right? Like if you're asking about, okay, how do I do this front end layout, blah, 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 then you have like some random question about cooking or something, right? Like you're probably gonna do a new, I mean, I do a new chat, I don't know, right? But like similar idea. So no, you don't have to, but yeah, you can. What happened to my scroll here? There we go. So which projects are in the VividCloud subgroup? And again, this is using the API agent. So we pointed to a open API spec. It parses that, figures out, again, using semantic search, using the LLM, okay, this is what they're asking for, what projects under the VividCloud subgroup, what API matches, or what endpoint matches that question best, basically. And then it gets something back. And then it'll compare what it gets back with what the original question was, and if it looks good, you'll get the response there. So what did we come up with? So again, we're verbose mode, so it's feeding back some output here, but here are the projects under the VividCloud subgroup. We've got 14.
So how many tokens did this take?
I don't know what's going on.
Maybe they're putting the mouse
center
in
of
the
the
middle.
chat, yeah.
Yeah, so 14,500. Now,
Yeah.
if you remove the verbose and ask the same question, be curious to see how many tokens it consumes.
So just to be clear, if you count, you won't find 14,000 tokens here. It's everything on the back end, and as you'll see next in the observability tool, it's a lot of JSON objects that are being parsed and distilled into this answer. So that's where you'll find all the tokens.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it might be different, right? Because I mean, we can try it, see what it gets. Does that work if I turn it off live?
Yeah.
You have to
Now
start a new chat?
No, you can start a question now. But I really hope it's the same number or close.
going off script here, so
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. I'll give the disclaimer while we're waiting. This is an internal app, not heavily tested. But yeah, we'll see. And then, like Adam said, we'll go look over at the traces, which I'm not super competent with. But anyways, we'll go look over there, and you can see.
I was gonna say it'd be interesting if you have a different number of projects, but.
Yeah.
So it gave a different answer because it already has history, so you're asking it again, so it's trying to find different projects. That's the reason. But notice it's more this time, even though the answer
Let's
is
try a
shorter.
new chat. Same question, not verbose.
That isn't a cumulative number for this chat session?
That's what I
It
thought
can
too.
be, because you are extending the history, so
Right.
yeah,
Right.
in a way.
That's why I think we need to start a new chat.
Which you just started a new one.
Yeah, I just started a new one, and same question, no verbose mode off. We'll say.
Context.
We get 3 different answers here.
That's
So
close.
back to
Close,
13,000,
Very close.
right? Okay, so we'll say, tell me about number 3. And sometimes these things are finicky, right? Like it's non-deterministic a lot of times, and typically that non-determinism is okay and that's desired, but sometimes it will lead to wrong answers, invalid answers, weird stuff. What did I say? Tell me more about number 3. All right, let's see. Legal contracts project, which it is. So prints out the details there. And again, that's using the API agent there to get all these details from GitLab. All right, that was 23,000 tokens. So those are the agents there. So this here is Langfuse, which is self-hosted. Again, Lang Smith is produced by the same people that make LangChain, LangGraph. They don't have a self-hosted option for that, or
No,
it's
no.
harder, I don't know. Anyways, this is open source, self-hosted. It's what we've been using more recently. So different things you can do in here. You can see, different stats around cost, number of traces, etc. Normal stuff here. Who your top users are. Okay, so we just burned, what, 53 cents? Yeah, 53 cents with all of that right there.
You might need to refresh for the real one. I think so.
Oh, did I not?
It seems too cheap.
Yeah, you're right. All
Or
right.
$1.
Doubled it. $1.10 almost. All right.
Expensive night.
So that's looking at your token consumption and giving you the money, and you have the upstream, the downstream ones cost differently, it calculates both ends?
Yeah, and we'll look at and again, I'm not super familiar with this, so Adam, please, I don't spend a lot of time in here like Adam does. What do I want to look at here? That's cool. The session?
The session, so keep in mind that's for admins, right? Like if you have an admin and you want to understand usage, so you can see who the users are, you can go into the conversation. So this is an example of the session that we just ran through the chat, and you can see a breakdown of everything happening in the backend for every question. That's one thing. And if you go back to traces, Dylan, if you click on the ID of one of the traces, this is how you really dive into each prompt and tool that runs in the back end, breaking the costs of each one of these further. Really helpful for debugging, troubleshooting, those long workflows.
And especially where you have, we're outputting certain messages in the thought process and the chain of reasoning to the the chat interface, but there's a bunch of messages going on behind the scenes to the LLM that you can't see through that. And a tool like this is, as Adam said, like really critical when you're in development mode and iterating on things and doing different testing, just to figure out what's going on. Otherwise, it's very, you can print stuff out to logs, to the console, whatever, but this interface really gives you a much better in-depth view to everything here. So yeah, a lot of different stuff here. If you are playing around with this or any LLM-based applications, even locally, like just for fun, whatever, install this, install Langsmith, install something so you can see things to this level of detail.
And you said this is open source?
Yep, Langfuse is open source, free. You just run it on your own.
Langsmith is easier to set up. It's just an API key. You just hook it up to the code. But again, you don't have that data privacy. That's why this is connected to a Postgres database that we manage. That's the reason. And we deploy it aside of the server.
Before I go back, we've got a few last slides we'll run through quickly. Anybody want to see anything else here on either of these?
One last question is,
Yeah.
how do you calculate, how does it display the number of tokens consumed? Do you have to feed the context back into an LLM to make the calculation, or?
So if you look at the code, there is kind of like a wrapper around the function. It's provided by the framework. It connects to this, sends it the tokens, and then for the price, Dylan, if you go to models, you'll see it has a table of models. So it gets the model ID, and that's the numbers that you saw on the slides for input and output tokens per 1,000. So if you change the model, it will pick it up automatically.
Oh, you're talking about the price. I'm talking about the token count.
Oh, yeah. So it's just through the code. You just have to.
You get that response from your LLM as part of your call. Or is it a separate call, or do you get it with the same call, or is it an option?
It's kind of like if you ever use the Python decorator. So it's a decorator over a function, basically kind of counts it for you and sends it to the server.
So it's not a separate query you have to do to get it. It comes back
Very
automatically.
minimally. Yeah.
Okay.
It's think of it as a built-in function that does the counting for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so this, as Adam said, this is just different price table. We're using Claude 3.5. So right here, 3 and 15, or whatever, 0.0, 0.3, and 1.5 there. All right.
I'm curious, if you go back to the first tab.
Yep.
In the SQL, in the API example.
Yeah, this one was one of the API examples.
Well, it was one that you didn't submit. It was in your list of stuff you're copying and pasting from. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm intrigued what that last one is about.
This one?
Yeah.
The commits? And sorry, if I knew how on my Mac to change it from extend displays to duplicate displays, I would do that, but I don't know how to do that button.
So that really is, so you're sort of giving a hint to the LLM how to achieve this.
Yeah, I would imagine that's because, and like you could do this as a system prompt, or you could do it like a different way, but I would imagine that's because maybe there's different endpoints that I was getting confused about when we were testing it before or something.
With what?
Which says latest commits by Adam. And then it says use the users/ID events endpoint.
Oh.
Probably was trying to use a different endpoint, or sometimes we try to use a different endpoint.
Kind of guiding it to the right way to do it. It could work without it too.
All right, so latest commits by Adam. All right, so we've got and see. So this is. So we didn't specify in the legal contracts project, right? But based on the context, because that's what we asked about before, it went through and did that specific to there.
Yeah, so GitLab has an events API where it spans over all the projects. So I'm just telling it to go there, I guess.
Let's see if this breaks it.
I think it was over all the projects. It's just.
Did it just lie in that?
Just a lot in that one.
Oh, are those actually your last 8 ones? Are in that?
Pretty sure if you look at the dates, they're pretty recent.
February.
Yeah.
I'd be terrified to have my commit messages be prevented.
Well, I was going to say,
That's why
if Adam wants us to see all this, but.
It's all good.
Looks like he was on vacation all of March.
We started working on the client.
He always looks busy.
Yeah.
Let's see if this gets us anything different or not. Legal contracts, no, I think Adam was right. Or is that the last one?
You can try to say what other projects, you know, kind of going off script again.
So have you had any issues with hallucination or anything like that with any of these three contexts?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe now you'll see one. The API agent, I think, is the most difficult one to manage. Even though it has the open API schema, for some reason it kind of gets finicky, kind of does what it wants to do. The SQL agent is the easiest one. We found that it's a matter of creating better tools for the agent. So if you put a lot of effort into tools, we see much better results, more than the prompt. The prompt is very superficial, while the tools is where you can really make a difference.
All right, we got some different projects here. So, anyways, again, yeah, nothing out of the ordinary there, or what you would expect from like ChatGPT type application, but again, connected to your own data. So that is.
So I guess my interest was as much about, you know, the prompt and the hint that you were giving it. So I assume, Adam, in some way we could sort of build that hint in.
Oh yeah, absolutely, to the prompt.
So that, somebody could just ask, hey, what were the latest commits by Jeff, and without having to have the hint as part of the prompt.
Let's see, just to get something to break here and to tickle your itch, Jeff. Here, scratch your itch. What is it? Let's see how it does.
So I'm wondering if it's using the events API. Yeah, it looks like it is.
So it's an example. The agent determined, it made a request, got whatever 400 error probably, and said, "Oh, we don't want that. Let's do something different."
Like how it apologizes for itself. That's wild.
I'm having a bad day.
26, 27. Okay, so I mean, it got something. I don't know. Those are not the same results as before, so. Or maybe they are on the second one when we said not the other one.
It says there might be an issue with the date. The dates are in the future.
Could be older, I don't know.
I know that these commits are in the same project, but we don't have the project name.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It could use another endpoint to get the project name. It does it sometimes, and it just chooses not to sometimes. So it's these little things.
Just like a teenager.
Yep, that's the same project.
There you go. All right. That answer your question, Jeff? So it worked in this case. We could. I'm not going to try it again, but we could try it again. It might not work, but anyways. So yeah, to your question, you could include that in something that we've talked about and haven't had time to explore. That's actually interesting. It's like system-wide memory. So like there where I said, give me the project ID, right? Like how would you prevent the next user who comes and asks and it gives the same response? Like how does the system know automatically? Okay, I did this last time. They wanted the project ID. I should just get that, right? Like how do you save the system-wide memory? That's not anything that we have implemented yet, but right, like that's.
Well, that's a double-edged sword, because if you share information across user sessions, that's opening the door for some accidental, unfortunate disclosures.
Right, but how do you generalize that so that you aren't exposing anything that you shouldn't, but that also provides a benefit to all of the users of the system? So yeah, there's a technical constraint of how do you do that, and then there's the security constraint and the information privacy constraint that all have to be contended with. So anyways, interesting nonetheless. So yeah, there's architecture here. Yeah.
On the security side, have you done anything to prevent any tampering with the system? any jailbreak of the LLM, any guardrails?
So one thing is the permissions that those agents have first are read-only. So that is defined with the connection string, API tokens, all of those things. Document agent is not relevant. And then with tempering, how do you have an idea of how to?
Yeah, if an end user is interfacing with your model or your app, how do you prevent the end user to ask stuff that is unrelated to what the tool is designed for?
So there is actually another workflow here that's not shown. The other, Adilon, if you want to show, just
Which one?
Open a new session and type tell me a joke, right? In a new session, and it will, I think that will answer your question. It's kind of like a
not designed for that or something.
Yeah, it's a black hole.
Yeah, I'm not designed to tell jokes.
All right.
I had a more colorful query the other day that was,
I was gonna do
it gave an appropriate response.
I had to
Shut-
restrain
shut me
myself.
down.
I had to restrain myself right there from not responding.
So that's a separate process you use.
It's part of the query router. It knows how to find those.
Okay.
And like you could probably bang against that for a while and come up with something, right, that would get through.
Yep.
I would imagine. I don't know. I don't think we've tried all that hard. But
Like if somebody would say, output the database schema, for example, would you?
That could work.
Would it
I
do
think-
it, or would it say?
that probably would work
not
unless we
supposed
told
to
it
really-
explicitly not
reveal
to.
that?
When you're querying the database, right?
Yeah.
It's not like querying the schema would give away any
Right.
That's the idea.
other information.
But I mean, if you want to try to give it a SQL query to run, I don't know if it will do it. I think it won't
Could you like install an extension or do something?
with
Or
with,
not?
with guardrails. No, it's all through prompting and the connection string. But I think the query will catch it. The query router, sorry.
Is there any concept of sort of like role-based access control in here? So,
Absolutely. So right now it's logged into Dylan's user.
okay.
So he has a certain number of tokens that he can use unlimited for him. And then you can even apply role-based, mainly in the case of the RAG, you can attach it to each chunk. So it can kind of filter out data you're not supposed to see.
Nice.
Can't beat it with a little bit of effort, anyways.
Trained by HR.
Yeah.
No specific technical information.
We just got a few slides here, just a little deeper into the agents. So here's document agent. You can just see the flow through here. I think we've talked about this a bit. But anyways, I guess we haven't mentioned metadata. So there's metadata, I'll step back. So post-processing ends up with a vector store. We're using RDS Postgres with a PG vector extension. They have vector-specific databases. I think Pinecone is a popular one. There's a few others. But for our purposes, this works fine for what we're doing. If you need more high performance or larger volume, et cetera, you can use one of those other vector-specific databases. So anyways, you take your documents, you break them down, you store those, you do a function call to get those vectors, store them in here, and then there's also this other option of metadata, which you combine the two. So just to filter out if let's say you've got metadata on these documents based on the year that they're applicable to, right? So if you have something that a user asks a query about a certain year, you can exclude all the other years, and you're reducing your search space for the retrieval from the vector store. which then, you can get more accurate results from that you're feeding into the LLM, but you're also reducing your token count by not feeding in a bunch of extra stuff, right? So if you can think you've got 5 years of health plan data and you ask about a specific plan that's in all 5 years, instead of retrieving all 5 of them, you do your metadata filtering, so you only get the year that you're talking about or the most recent year, and you pass that on, so cost savings and accuracy improves as well, potentially, right? And a lot of this, you got to tweak things, you play around with it, but that's the goal there. And the API agent here, so we talked about this one a little bit, but yeah, you've got this API, open API schema reader, so it parses that, it figures out what endpoints do we have, what is the shape of things in general, what are we dealing with, what is this, and it uses that to take the user's queries and try to determine a course of actions to get a result. And SQL agent, again, we talked about it, so I'll run through quickly. And if anybody has questions on any of these or wants to talk more in depth, we can. But anyways, yeah, get the schema, figure out the schema, what tables, columns, etc. And then for each query, take that, use the LLM to try to take that input query, determine what actions need to be taken, what queries need to be made, check that query's valid, get a response. Does that response look like what it should look like for this query? Yes, great, return it. If not, repeat those steps again until you get somewhere or you hit your whatever your upper threshold is for retries, basically.
In regards to these agents, when you folks have customers that you work with, does the customer own and maintain the agent, or is that VividCloud that's doing that for them?
So we build it out for them. There's a handoff process typically, right? Like, so if we're staying engaged or building it out or building functionality, we'll be there for a longer time. If they have a specific use case, okay, we've got these thousands of documents that we want to be able to have a chatbot over, and they can't go out anywhere. They're restricted within here, so we need a custom application. We would develop that, and if it is a true handoff, right, like teach them about it. They have the code, they own it, that's all theirs. So they would maintain that and develop that going forward if they wanted to, right? If they wanted to keep us engaged and continue work on it or develop additional features, that's an option as well. But
so if there was an opportunity where you folks found, hey, there's a way to reduce token usage significantly, say you discover that 6 months from now, do you go back to your customers and share that knowledge, or like what does that cycle kind of look like?
It depends. We haven't run across that situation, right? Like we're in the beginning stages of this with clients. We've done a few different projects, and they're all relatively, in the last 6 months. So there hasn't been anything that hasn't come up yet. But a lot of this as well, right? Like with that demo, with that chatbot interface, a lot of it on the commercial side, which is outside of the scope of what any of us deal with here, but meaning at VividCloud. But the commercial side is like, how do you, right, we typically build time and materials, sometimes we do fixed scope projects, but typically time and materials, that's already built, right? As part of the agreement, like that code is coming from us, it's being used as a starter, you will own it afterwards, but all the licensing, right, like that's handled by somebody else that knows how to deal with that. So yeah, I don't have an answer to how we would handle that. Yeah, it depends. We may inform them that, hey, we can come and do this update and we know it'll take this long, or whatever, or here's the general idea of it. If you have an internal team working on it now, it'd be worth looking at, right? So or that's again, in our business.
Can the customer change the model in Bedrock?
They can do whatever they want after, when we're done with it, we're done. And if we're out of there, they own it fully. If they want, right? Like if they want to keep us engaged or have somebody on maintenance for 10 hours a week or like whatever, right? Like all those things are options, and those are
so
negotiable.
It's not like they buy a piece of software, they essentially buy a solution which they own afterwards.
Correct. They own 100% of the code. They can do whatever they want with it. They can change it, modify it, customize it, ruin it. Whatever they want.
Fair.
Yeah.
We do try to leave a lot of these, like the model. It's configurable. The prompts are configurable, so they don't really have to change the code. Try to make it easier for them.
And we're not trying to put them in a position where like this thing's unmaintainable and they have no idea how they're ever going to wrap their head. Like if we're doing that, we're doing a bad job, right? Like whether maliciously or not. Like
most companies do. So
right. No, we want to hand it off if that's the goal, and if the goal is for us to stay engaged, we're going to do the same thing as far as the code goes. But the goal is to give them an end product that's polished, that's finished, that they can navigate about, that they can customize if they want. Yeah, and a lot of the companies that we're talking to right now and doing projects with in this space are larger companies that don't necessarily have an AI footprint, and they don't have people that have capabilities in this yet. So some of them are using this as kind of like a springboard to, okay, you've got to work in the application, you've got these resources that can kind of train you up a little bit on how this works and all of that through the handoff process. And then you can tweak with it and play with it after that. And you have others who are like, we don't want to do that, or we want the solution, and then we don't want to deal with it. We just, if there's fixes that we need, we'll engage you guys for that as we go. So yeah, different options there. We looked at this, so yeah, laying fuse, observability, we saw all that. What we didn't see is testing in here, and I don't think it's in that instance right now, but we mentioned testing, a critical part of this solution is as you change things, right, you have a ground truth of okay, we're developing an answer over our internal document set. Let's develop 20 questions, and here's the answers to those 20 questions. Now, every time we make a change to our application, let's run these tests, see what the answers are, see what our correctness score is. So you can see this is actually this is real correctness results from different things that we did, different versions of the application, right? So right now we're sitting right around 90%, which again, for our needs and what the application is good. Sometimes you can go a little bit less. Sometimes you may need it higher depending on what you're doing. But that's another cool feature that you get visibility-wise with a tool like Langfuse or Langsmith. And you're using a cool part of this, or maybe not cool, depending what side you're on, but you're using the LLM to determine the correctness of the answer. Because right, again, there's variability. They're not going to be word for word matches. So here's what the answer should be, here's what the answer was. Are these two similar enough to consider it correct with this given question? So yeah, kind of LLM inception here, and infinite recursion, but it's useful and it's pretty good. So that's it for the slides. Any other questions for anyone? Yeah.
I mean, I'm really interested in the testing portion. Is that something that you folks built, or is that kind of like there's off the shelf?
I'll let Adam answer that one.
So the pattern, LLM as a judge, it's just a testing pattern for these type of applications because of the non-determinism, like Dylan said. And then Langfuse kind of lets you define your question in a certain format in JSON, you push them to Langfuse, and then you just run it. So you see like that dip is, I think, in the RAG agent, when we did pre-processing, we cleaned paragraphs, right? We thought, let's do text cleaning, and that dropped the correctness, for example.
And how do you weight, like, which is the better LLM? Like, how do you,
Yeah.
Before you start, like, you're looking at, okay, context window, like, and if cost is not an option, you always want the largest context window and basically the most parameters. The more parameters, typically you're gonna have better correctness, you're gonna have better results, typically. So there's different techniques where whatever, you could have fewer parameters and get equivalent results. But if cost is an option, you just want the best that there is, right? But depending on what your use case is, if you're doing something big that's gonna have a lot of data required to formulate your answers, like what we showed here as an example, you're going to want a more robust model. But if you're doing something that's simple, that I don't even know what something that simple would be, but like for our router, like Adam said, that you could use a smaller LLM for that portion of it, just to determine which tool to use.
like a long or something?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it depends what you're doing, but yeah, those are going to be your constraining factors. Your context window is really going to be the biggest constraint. But then you would define your test questions and just test it and see what it is. And that testing process can take a long time depending on what you're doing, right? Like for an API, for something where there's an offline processing step, and you'd have to run that offline processing step for each individual test, potentially, like, right, you're looking at a decent amount of time, depending on how long all of that takes. But yeah, you really have to iterate, you have to test, trial and error, figure it out by doing that.
GPT-4 and Claude, and Claude had the better results. We didn't try any other ones.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of testing involved, a lot of trial and error, and like again, you've got different patterns that come out, different ideas that come out of even a question, right? So if you get a question, you can feed that into the LLM as here's the question, or you can step back and reformulate it, come up with 5 similar questions, like feed all of them. Like there's a ton of different things that you can do that all impact the end result, and what you think may be good ends up being bad, and vice versa. So yeah, the only way to do it is to
Just
quantify
like
it.
carpentry, measure twice, cut once. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, there you go. And yeah, the way
This is
things are
cool.
the way things are changing, it's yeah, to stay on top of it and you know, make sure you're ahead of the curve, or at least at the curve, is a challenge in and of itself. So yeah, that's what we've learned thus far. We're still doing a ton of learning. You know, just like everyone in this space, it's exciting, but there's a lot of new stuff all the time. So yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And that's it for the presentation. So thank you guys.
Have you played with anything like Operator or Manus?
I don't even know what those are now. What are those?
Autonomous agent.
No.
You tell it what to do, and it spins up an instance of a computer and goes and does it.
Like coding tasks or anything?
Anything.
Really?
Yeah.
What is it called?
That's cool.
The latest one from China that got released yesterday, I think, is called Manus.
Okay.
Manus.
I'll have to look at it. I was talking to Chris. I've done some. StackBlitz has a product called Bolt.new. I think is
Yeah.
their website. It builds applications or websites in the Node environments, and I was really impressed. I actually played around with it like a week ago, tried it out for the first time, and I got like a full-blown site that was fully, you know, like responsive, looked good, color schemes looked good, content was all there. It's just like, make me a marketing site for this with a few pages, and like I was impressed by what that could do. So yeah, anyways, there's a lot of stuff going on there. I haven't played with like Cursor, or I don't do a ton of hands-on coding anymore anyways, but I don't know if anybody's got experience with those tools. But I'd be curious what people think of those as well.
Real quick before I end the recording, I realized that I did not thank Blue Mantis as one of our sponsors, so I wanted to make sure that got on the recording. I apologize for that, and also thank you to VividCloud and Dylan as well. VividCloud did provide the food and drinks today, so thank you to them. Yeah, so I'm going to end the recordings now. We can stick around and chat.